Well, what's wrong with that?
Nothing if you can prove it. But take a tip from me, Bud, don't try it. Jake and me don't like to waste our time testifying in court. But we will. So long.
Exhibit 8, Bud, in case you get stubborn. Hey, now, wait a minute, copper. All right, leave her things alone. You want to come along, soldier?
If you love listening to this show, please consider giving a rating and a review on Amazon Alexa or wherever you listen. We want to continue bringing you this amazing content, and part of our ability to do that means that we need a big audience. Now, it may not seem like much, but rating and reviewing the show will help more people find us, just like how you found this show. Simply on any podcast platform, search for a show, scroll down to the bottom, and push 5 stars. It's that easy. Thanks for supporting the show. Today, I'm joined by Chris Kaiser, who is a founder and CEO with Click a Tree. Thanks for joining today.
Hi, Scott. Pleasure to be on. Thank you for your time.
So, Chris, how did you get so passionate about planting trees? And what was the genesis of that?
I enjoyed the immense privilege of working in skin-to-skin contact in Thailand with elephants in Thailand for 5 years. And what can you say? You just fall in love with these gentle giants. Their biggest challenge, unfortunately, is the loss of habitat due to deforestation, agriculture, infrastructure projects, you name it. That's when we started planting trees, basically to provide habitat for elephants. And from there on, things grew. People loved what we did. They loved the holistic approach that we took to planting trees. Then we got approached by other project nations who said, look, we need to reforest our country. Can you help us with that? That's how things took off.
So that's quite interesting. I want to spend a little bit of time in terms of the elephants in Thailand specifically. Of course, Thailand, like some of the other Southeast Asian countries, use them for purposes of, kind of essentially workhorse, but also for tourism and entertainment, to the point where they are mistreated. And I personally have witnessed it myself, where they have had, wounds from the pickaxe or whatever it is that they use to train and discipline these animals. Can you talk about what percentage of the elephants are wild still in the forest versus those that are held in captive and used for means of profit?
In Thailand, it's about 50-50 these days. So you would have about 6,000 elephants left in Thailand, and then 3,000 live in captivity, and the other 3,000 roam in the wild.
Gotcha. And also talk a little bit about the economy of Thailand in the sense of, aside from tourism and some of the other things that contribute to GDP, what's the role of agriculture as well as the export of trees, tree products?
It is actually a super high percentage of their economy. They are especially famous for rubber tree products such as rubber and latex, and they have a huge palm oil industry as well. And that, of course, it somehow contributes to the tree cover because it is a rubber tree or an oil palm, but it's not exactly habitat for animals. So unfortunately, a lot of forests are basically taken down to clear the land, and then you grow those types of trees. And you can say, look, we planted trees, but it's not exactly where biodiversity thrives. But it is super important to the local economy. Yeah.
So that's a really great point, because palm oil has been, in many ways, kind of controversial for a number of reasons, including what you're talking about, which is actually goes against biodiversity, as well as you're basically removing things that's more indigenous or local to that area and creating a kind of homogeneous single plant system. What's the effect when you do that to the environment and animal life?
In most cases, it's basically the end of everything you would call biodiversity. I mean, you have a centuries-old jungle that is growing there, you know, and there's a lot of scientists saying that in a single handful of soil from a proper jungle or forest, there's more life forms than there's humans on Earth. Whereas once you take all that down, the entire ecosystem loses its protection, which are the trees. They protect it mostly, of course, from the heavy rains, because once the rain can just fall on the ground, it would wash all the soil away, and with it, all the nutrients that are so vital to then encourage further growth. And if there's only, say, rubber trees, for example, what kind of animals live there? There's a couple of birds, for example, yes, but there wouldn't be any monkeys, say, who could find fruit there and nourish themselves. And it basically just takes everything away. So it is a very challenging thing, because you just mentioned the palm oil, you know, it is apparently the most efficient oil per square meter that you can produce. But because it is produced in such large quantities, and it is almost in every product we use in everyday life, it is unbelievable how huge these areas are that are deforested just to create or produce this palm oil. And that, of course, yeah, takes all the biodiversity away and all the habitat for animals.
So for, you know, someone like you who's leading an organization to help bring that biodiversity back, not to mention the benefit to the decarbonization effort, is this, you know, issue around property ownership and some of the local laws in terms of, you know, how do you protect some of these trees. So how do you go into a deforested or maybe a more single tree or single plant system environment, plant those trees and ensure that those trees that you're trying to plant are actually left alone to grow?
It's a very good point, and a super important part of the work we do, because from our experience, it mostly comes down to education. People often don't understand the long-term effects that a monoculture of trees can have. Because quite often, you know, you would grow, say, the oil palms, and yes, you reap the profits for a couple of years, but then because all the nutrients are washed out of the soil, you can't do much more with the land. And that's the problem when, you know, the land is just unusable and you move on, you deforest the next part of the jungle and you continue to grow your oil palms there and you leave the degraded land alone. So we work with the people to explain to them, yes, you could make more profits in the next 3 years if you would grow tobacco or oil palms or whatever on your land. But think of your kids and your grandchildren, you know, and if we pay you continuously a stable, fair salary for growing the trees, nursing the trees, looking after the trees, and letting them grow as a forest, then you reap the rewards for 10, 20, 30 years to come. And once people understand that, it is a charm working with them. And quite often it's the people who have been harmed by this other system before, who have had a monoculture on their land for a couple of years and then realize, yeah, it worked well for a while and now nothing grows, you know. And then you take them onto this other system, which is biodiversity. As you mentioned before, you know, nature developed the best weapons itself. We don't have to do it. We just need to follow nature's lead. And then we basically grow what had been growing there before in the first place. And it suddenly turns into a thriving ecosystem. And because we pay people for the long term to, you know, leave the trees there and just look after them, they still receive their salary, biodiversity thrives, there's a lot of carbon being sequestered, and it is a win-win for everyone involved.
So I think you're really starting to allude to your core IP or approach, and I think we have seen others that have used similar models as well. Because it really, you know, at the end of the day, it's not just education. If the incentive structure isn't properly aligned, and it creates a disincentive or no incentive for them to take care of the other trees that provides, you know, richness and the biodiversity versus monoculture, they're not going to do it, and you're not going to have that behavior adoption. So talk about the core model and who is then supporting or capitalizing this particular model so that you can effectively provide the salaries to those to tend to the trees.
I completely agree. And yes, it is necessary to pay the people, as you say. If they don't see an incentive for themselves, why should they do it? You know, if you take a person in central Ghana or northern Thailand, they're not responsible for climate change because their carbon footprint is tiny enough that our planet could support it. But then you take it to Europe, and there's lots of companies and, of course, individuals as well who begin to realize that the lifestyle we've been leading today just isn't sustainable in the long term. And they want to compensate sometimes, or they just want to do good, often altruistically thinking people who also want to, you know, contribute to a better planet. Some people have this foresight to understand if we continue to exploit our planet the way we do at the moment, all the people living in less privileged regions than we do, they will need to migrate at some point because their land just becomes uninhabitable. And they will migrate to, say, Europe or Northern America or something, and that will lead to tremendous problems. So if you think far enough ahead, you'd be well advised to start battling the challenges at the root, which is providing stable jobs to the people who need them, make sure they can eat every day, and then we keep our planet somewhat alive. So it would be mostly people in the Western world, so to say, who are keen to contribute to this cause. And there's a lot of people who are happy, you know, to either pay a little bit extra or to make a conscious decision about what they consume, like which product they buy. And they rather buy like a jumper or something that plants a tree when the jumper is bought than just buying the cheap jumper that they had been buying before.
So how are you guys structured, you know, in terms of, in the US, we have, you know, entities like B Corp, 501c3. How are you structured so that you can actually, you know, facilitate transference of, let's say, carbon tax credit effectively from the developed nations to the emerging or underdeveloped nations?
Funny enough, in this case, we took the very commercial for-profit road because we want to take this tree planting, or generally this doing good kind of stuff, out of this non-profit niche. We want to commercialize doing good, because by the time we can show people that you can work a profitable business model around doing something positive for the planet, there will be a lot of people following lead. And that is the snowball effect that we need to actually make a difference. We as Click a Tree can make somewhat of a difference, but we can't save the planet all alone. What we rather focus on is building a sustainable business model that then inspires other people to create something similar. And that way everybody profits. And because we live in a capitalistic system, we're not aiming to change the system. We're rather implementing an additional twist to it, which is this charitable work, which then is combined with that capitalistic system. That way we are a for-profit company. We always will be. It also enables us to go down different marketing routes that non-profits can do. It helps us to work a lot more efficiently because we are profit-driven. And then it helps us to also inspire other people to do the same thing.
So help us understand a little bit more, if you could break it down in terms of, you know, who are really the primary sources? Are these corporations, brands that's looking to affiliate themselves with climate change and decarbonization? And then based on that, you direct that to the different geographies and certain goals or metrics around the number of trees. How does it all work, and what kind of volume are we talking about, both in trees, but also as a business?
Good point. Yeah. So indeed, it would be corporations. We have some big names on board, like the Best Western Hotels or Expedia or Skyscanner. And we have a lot of small and medium-sized businesses as well, just because they can make decisions a lot faster. And you have an impact-driven CEO, for example. He says, "Yes, I like what you do. Let's support this," and it just moves a lot quicker. And then we facilitate that. We work with the people on site. We have the knowledge for how to set up the system on site, that it works and that the entire commune can profit from it, and make sure that the money is used efficiently. So that is the bonus, because of course when you're like a mid-sized company, you wouldn't know what the right approach to, I don't know, tree planting in central Ghana or something would be, for example. So we come in as sort of a sustainability consultant, as you, if you so wish, and then enable this connection to make sure that the entrepreneur or the company or the corporation finds a project that also fits their needs and their goals. Because of course, a tree planting project isn't the same all over the globe. You always have a slightly different focus, and it always depends what you want to achieve with your company. As you say, some people want to go after the carbon offsetting, other people rather want to drive social impact or increase education in certain areas. And there's always different ways how to structure these tree planting projects.
Interesting. So you guys are serving as experts that provide the bonding, bridging at the local level so that it can actually be executed, and serving as an intermediary.
Great way to put it.
Yeah, between the large entities. Now, the large entities, is this coming out of their marketing budget? And where is the budget coming from? And the reason I'm asking is, the recurrence. So if it's a private concern, private business, you want to think in terms of having, reliable cash flow. So how does it work? And are these one-time gifts, or the actual, some sort of commitment that they have to follow through that then has ESG impact?
Exactly. No, it's a brilliant question, because of course, when we talk about sustainability, it also is our own sustainability, of course, because we can't enable all this if we don't have our cash flow. So most of there's some partners who take it out of the marketing budget, and some partners do it because they are good people, sort of thing. But most partners, we actually recommend, calculate the price for a tree and then calculate that into your sales price. And then it's up to you. You can plant 1 tree per jumper, or 3 trees, or 5 or 10, or whatever suits your budget, and will still be paid by your clients. In the end, most of the time, it should be the client who pays for that. And most people are happy to pay for it because they know they're actually supporting something positive. And that way, we also set up a long-term collaboration. The one-time plantings are cool, and they happen maybe at Christmas time. People are like, okay, let's do something good for the world because it's Christmas. But a tree planting project is a decade-long project, sometimes 2 or 3 decades. For that, you need to ensure that you create partnerships where everybody benefits, and that also includes that, of course, the partners that invest in us, like the bigger corporations, benefit by seeing a growth in sales. And we're super happy to report that the partners that we work with, they see an increase in sales, because then sustainability is a super important purchasing factor these days. And then people go like, oh, look, this company, they plant trees now, if I go eat with them, or if I stay at their hotel brand, or whatever it might be. And they make the conscious decision to choose this brand over another brand. And that way the revenues of that company grow, and the CEO goes, oh, look, since we plant trees, our revenues grow. That's awesome. Everybody benefits. So they continue this cooperation. And that's what we want to achieve, that it turns into a long-term thing. But we don't contract people, especially now during COVID. It would have been strange to tell the hotels, look, you don't make any money, but you still need to pay us 10 grand to offset or to plant the trees that you promised. I mean, where should the money come from? So we'd rather say, look, tie it to your own sales. If you sell out your room, plant a tree. If you don't sell the room, okay, there's no cost or anything for you.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and I'm very pleased to hear that the enterprises are responding to this model of, tying it to the sales measurement versus again, it's a totally different budget line item and budget organization, and you basically are in a way aligning their success with your success, and I think that's very smart. And that approach, has it been received very well, would you say?
Excellent, yes. We're quite surprised about it too, but on the one hand, that we're taking tree planting out of this non-profit thing. I don't know, for some reason, a few non-profits don't get the best reputation over the last years. Other companies say, look, we're a for-profit company. We want to support a for-profit company. There's always different motivations, but we've been super well off to tell people openly, look, we're not a non-profit. We're not asking for donations. We're a for-profit company. We send you an invoice. You pay for the invoice like you would pay for everything else that you purchase. And then on the other hand, we're also delighted to see that clients actually make this conscious decision to then go to this company that actually now plants trees, because that is what keeps the entire model working. And as long as people are willing to make this effort to research, like I want to buy a new laptop, which laptop brand plants trees, for example, and then purchase this particular laptop, that then motivates this brand to continue with their engagement, and also motivates other brands to say, oh, look, the sales of this brand are going through the roof. Why? They plant trees. Yeah, well, we should start planting trees too. And that way, suddenly everybody's encouraged. So we're super happy that actually it goes up and up and up, and the sales of our partners increase quarter over quarter, and that way everybody profits.
So I think the reason we're spending a little bit of time on this is, I think, as much as NGOs and nonprofits are ideal for a lot of this climate change action, the reality is, without the sustainability of the actual organizations to actually stay afloat, it becomes precarious in their ability to actually have sustained impact. So by being clever and aligning the right incentive structure with the actual source of capital to where it's going to the families and the individuals that's attending to these trees, that alignment all the way through that process stitches something that becomes very, very much integrated in what we call interlocking strategy. And that actually means that you have a better chance of, let's say, decades and decades later, being more successful, having a longer, bigger impact, meta impact than, let's say, somebody else that was a nonprofit that was just depending on month to month, year by year, donations on a one-time basis. So I think it's clever, it's smart, and it makes a lot of sense. My last question for you is: can you give us some metrics around whether it's a number of trees or whether it's a carbon, decarbonation numbers they can share?
Yeah, surely. So since inception of Click a Tree, which was in 2018, we planted over 100,000 trees. We are at about 117,000 at the moment, which is pretty good. But if we're honest, the majority of the trees were planted actually in the first 2 years. The last year was a bit of a setback for us as well, because we had so many partners in the tourism and gastronomy sector, and they unfortunately suffered. And as you said, we tie our tree plantings to their success. If they're not successful, we plant less trees. So it can, of course, also mean a setback. But luckily, we had enough other partners like e-commerce shops and mobility partners and stuff who could at least secure all the jobs for the people on site. So that was valuable, in my opinion, this year when things ease up a little bit and the vaccinations are finally working and people can travel again, things will pick up again. So we're very pleased with how that went. Regards the CO2 sequestration, it always depends a little bit how you calculate. So some people would say, a tree can absorb between 12 to 25 kilograms of CO2 per year. Some even go above that. And then it depends, of course, on the lifespan of the tree. What I'm always a bit hesitant about is that some people say, look, you just flew to New York to Bangkok. It costs you 800 kilograms of CO2. Why don't you plant 2 trees? Because the thing is, they will only absorb that amount of CO2 over the course of their lifetime. And you emit all the CO2 right now. So I think that is a little bit of a difficult calculation. So we don't focus too much on the calculation of CO2 sequestration. We can, if partners really want to, we can issue CO2 certificates via our partners in the Philippines, for example. But most of the time, we rather say, look, you're doing a lot of good. Don't count it just in CO2 numbers, because you're doing so much more. You're providing habitat for animals, you create jobs for people. So honestly, just be proud of the amazing stuff you achieve, and don't just try to offset the amount of CO2 that you're emitting.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So with that, I've been joined by Chris Kaiser, who is the CEO with Click a Tree. Thanks for joining today.
Thank you, Scott. It was a pleasure.
If you've enjoyed this episode, take a moment to rate our show on any podcast platform that you listen to. Scroll down to the bottom and push 5 stars. It's that easy. And as always, thanks for listening.